I'm Cheryl Matochik, Senior Vice President of Strategic Resources and Initiatives here at the Council in Washington, D.C., where I focus on underlying factors contributing to the changing commercial insurance market, the dynamics of that in the U.S. and globally, and in turn, arming brokers that are members of the Council with intel to help with just strategic decision making. So that's a little bit about my role at the Council. I'm really thrilled to be joined today by Scott Robertson, who's the Managing Director at KPISoft. KPISoft, for those of you that have not heard of this really unique company, is headquartered in Houston, but is a global company and leader in providing a variety of industries with enterprise performance management software via an AI-driven platform. We selected KPISoft to have this conversation, and Scott in particular, with today, for a variety of reasons, but about a year ago, the Council surveyed a mixture of our broker members around the topics that are biggest priority as brokers think about utilizing technology and data increasingly in their businesses to create efficiencies, to smooth out the client experience, and also drive more unique value and offerings to their clients. And one of the things that we sort of rose to the top of that list as we did that survey was in the data analytics provider space, of which there is a huge abundance of companies selling into through the broker channel. One of the areas that I think our constituent base at the Council has most been focused on is internally within their operations, leveraging data analytics to enhance commercial insurance brokerage performance. That led as one of the top issues brokers in the Council's membership were seeking to tackle about a year ago, and continue to hear a lot of activity on that front. So this podcast should be very timely. Really thrilled to have you with us, Scott. Scott, it would be great if you could sort of set the stage and tell us a little bit about KPISoft's story and where the company is today.
You bet. Well, first and foremost, thank you, Cheryl, for the invite and the opportunity to be able to speak with the Council as well as the constituents of the Council. So we're honored and privileged to be part of the conversation today. KPISoft was founded back in 2008, and really it was founded traditionally as a performance management tool. As that continued to grow, and we kind of stayed in the lab for a long time because we wanted to do something beyond traditional performance management. And so in 2016, we did our global launch really as a system of intelligence, delivering hyper-personalized, contextual, time-relevant insights to the employees to enable them to elevate in whatever data point they needed elevation in, or whatever increase inside the organization that was trying to happen. And so you started looking at strategies that was happening in the B2C consumer world, whether it was something like a Facebook or a Netflix or a LinkedIn or even in an Uber type of scenario, where technology began to understand the user and began to make recommendations to the user. And so that's really when we began to change the idea of what analytics was and how consumers and how users wanted to be able to adopt analytics.
No, that's great. I mean, tell us, Scott, a little bit more about how you got into the insurance vertical. You didn't start there, and how did you arrive at bringing the solution into the insurance market?
Yeah, you bet. So when we started, it was really an area where we had a company that we were dealing with, a client that we were dealing with, and they were trying to engage their agents, right? In this particular scenario, or in their particular setup, they were a captive agent market or a captive agent model. And they were dealing with roughly 90% of the revenues coming out of about 10% of the agents. And what they were trying to understand is, in this very disparate model where they had agents spread all over a region, a very large, expansive region, how could they engage the agents, produce information down to the agent level in a very contextual, real-time environment so they could see what kind of tendencies were going on in the marketplace, what kind of products might need to be recommended to clients, how do we increase wallet share inside the agencies, how do I increase my commissions and my earnings as an agency. And so that was kind of really the beginning. We rolled that scenario out to where we could get down to an independent agent level. What was important to that agent? How could they grow their book of business? What kind of product looks might they want to be able to bring into their particular marketplace? And then the way our platform works is it contextualizes at each level. There's different personas, right? So the chief revenue officer of the agency was wanting to see longer-term trends. The area managers within the agency wanted to be able to understand different performance levels across multiple agent and multiple location scenarios, and how to be able to help enhance and grow each one of those agencies in their particular regions. And then down specifically at the agent level, they wanted to know, what do I need to do about my book of business right now? And so as we contextualize those insights all the way down, what we found was you could align really where the key performance factors were for the organization from a strategic level, but also at the agency level. And you saw growth in wallet share, you saw growth in premiums, you saw growth in market segment that began to have a very significant effect for the organization.
So tell me, keep on that thread. Tell me a little bit more about how the platform takes in data and what you need at the baseline level in order for the platform to really really use its brain and work in the way that you just described, and contextualizing the information for different personas within a company based on your role.
Yeah, great question, right? The perception inside of companies right now is that a lot of organizations feel like they don't have the right data to be able to implement a system of intelligence or some type of artificial intelligence platform, right? When we really break it down for them, every organization is already doing these type of methods. There's reports that are already being generated. They're typically in some type of Excel spreadsheet. Maybe they're in some type of performance management platform. But that data doesn't align with data that might be sitting inside of a CRM system. So what we look at is, all right, let's take the data that's coming in from the sales force or CRM system. Let's look at the data that's inside the ERP system. Let's look at our marketing data that might be sitting in a different strategic system. And then let's look at market tendencies that are going on outside of all that might be in real world scenarios, whether it's different industry reports that need to be looked at, whether it's growth that's happening in a particular region based on market sector. So there's a lot of real world data that's just sitting out on the web or other industry reports. The key to all of that, though, is that we spend a lot of time, with our clients understanding what is it that you're trying to measure. What is the data points that are most significant to the organization that you're trying to elevate, that you're trying to grow. And when we get into the data conversation or when we get into the metrics conversation, what we find is typically in order to be able to move a single data point, you're having to grab data out of multiple systems that currently aren't connected. And so as we begin to build the data that supports each data point and then generates the persona layers down to, this is what the agent wants to see out of that data, here's what the area manager is looking to see, here's what the vice president's looking to see, and here's what the CRO is looking to see, but it's all aligned on that single data point. And when the insight is sent, that insight is now contextualized to every individual at the same time. So instead of being in a situation like one of our CROs who works with us, whenever he would go out into the field and meet with his sales organization or his brokerage organization, he would kind of have a whole set of reports. And they would sit down and they would have to review all that, and they'd have meetings, and then they'd walk away, and 3-4 weeks later, they'd come back So we're going to compress all of that down into about a 45-minute conversation. That insight's going to go from the C-level all the way down to the execution layer, the agent themselves. Everybody understands what that data point is, and everybody gets the movement or the insight of here's where you need to go next, here's the direction that you want to take. And that's how we build those type of systems to be able to push that data.
That's really helpful. You know, I think you touched on, you know, illuminating for us, you know, what the ideal, you know, I think our listening audience would love to understand kind of in an ideal client persona looks like. As you look to the U.S. market and the commercial independent insurance brokerage community, is there sort of an ideal customer persona that you find in the insurance sector in the U.S. is really attractive to you at KPISoft?
Absolutely. There's really two, if you will. The first is that large insurance organization or the large brokerage organization that's in high acquisition mode. They're growing, they're developing through acquisition, and now they're pulling in these smaller brokerage organizations. But how do I assimilate the two organizations together? How do I grab what data is important to us and begin to push that data into that new acquisition? So that ends up becoming a very interesting conversation because typically that's long and it's drawn out and it takes a lot of time just to work those two assimilation pieces together. But when you begin having the performance conversation around that, then it's, okay, here's the data that we're tracking, here's the performance metrics that we're tracking, and there's some alignment and there's some misalignment. And where the misalignment comes, that's where you want to use your data analysts, you want to use your business analysts, you want to maybe use some data scientists in the large brokerage organizations that are already there and have them really focus on let's put the data models inside the acquisitions so that we can get the most out of that acquisition and we can get the most uplift from the acquisition that we've done. And so they really understand that data is an asset, and they want to be able to maximize that asset to its greatest capabilities. The other organization that's really strong inside the marketplace is that middle market organization. And they're the organization that doesn't necessarily have access to deep data science. They're not really looking for deep data science. But what they do want is they want smart analytics. They want to be able to take the data that they have, apply smart analytics to it in an easy to understand way and push that out to their field. And the quicker they can push that out to the field in a highly adaptive, personalized manner, now they get the benefit of analytics without the heavy investment maybe that's needed and the deep data science that's needed that they're not ready to go whole hog into or necessarily have the desire to go whole hog into. So those are the two key areas that we look for. But first and foremost, it has to be an organization that recognizes data as an asset.
Do you feel like in the conversations that you've been having that, you know, from my perspective, you say, you know, data has to be viewed as an asset and people have to be willing to invest in that. I believe it's table stakes going forward. Do you feel like that is the general sentiment, particularly of, you know, the two groups that you just identified as ideal customer prospects here in the insurance market in the U.S. commercially?
Absolutely. I mean, it very much is table stakes right now. You're seeing massive shifts that are occurring, and organization. Here's the real challenge, right? Is that a lot of companies recognize that data is an asset, but they don't know how to align my data strategy with my business strategy.
Right.
And so you'll see the development of chief data officers, and those are highly valuable inside organizations right now, right? But you don't want to silo that data officer because you have data right now, and that data is already siloed within your organization. It's how do you begin to de-silo the data so that we can push the right information to the right individual at the right time to make the right decision and really enhance the employee at every level. And that not only is where you are right now today, But if we begin to look at the next generation of agents and the next generation of brokers that are being brought into the process, how do we ramp them up faster? How do we get them the data that they need in a platform that they understand? And how do we begin to measure whether I've even got the right talent to continue to grow the organization? And so when you begin to align this information properly, then you're creating this next generation type of platform that they're already very familiar with, right? Facebook is already making recommendations to those individuals. Netflix is already telling them what they need to watch on TV. Google already understands what it is they want to buy. Amazon's already built out entire bridal registries for these individuals based on what they've done previously. So now the technology is on the back end already building out what it is expected of them and what it is that we believe they're going to do and how it's going to make an impact in their life. Well, when you start to bring that same technology into an insurance space, not only for your internal employees, but also now for your customers and how you're looking at churn, you're looking at renewals, you're looking at expanding wallet share, that ends up being very, very powerful information that you're now moving 2 and 3 steps faster than your competition in really kind of changing the way the game is made. And that, as you mentioned, the table stakes are very, very high.
Can you talk a little bit about, Scott, your competition, some of the surprises in the competitive landscape, and what do you feel is KPISoft's positioning and advantage around that?
Yeah, great question. I think the biggest challenge in the space, and this is why I like to use the word system of intelligence more so than AI these days, is that all of a sudden everybody's AI.
Right. Yeah, it's like, what does that mean, AI?
Exactly. Every company on the block, you throw up a new shingle, and yes, we're AI. But what exactly does that mean? Mm-hmm. And most of the companies themselves who are invested or looking to understand this space are still trying to answer that question, and so they don't necessarily know the right questions to ask or what AI means to them, right? And I should say that. What does AI mean to them? And then what does it mean to strategic performance management? Are we talking about just machine learning around claims management? Are we looking at policy selections? Are we looking at risk matching technologies and utilizing AI and machine learning from risk matching scenarios, which are certainly very important? What we really look at and where we try to define ourselves is, yes, the analytics are crazy important, but the analytics without context is just data. And the trap that organizations find themselves in is they go and grab data because data is very important. But now, how do we take that data after we've grabbed massive amounts of it and contextualize it so that a user knows what to do with the data? And how do we know what data to push to which individual? And how that data is going to now be used and consumed to lift the organization? That becomes a very, very challenging point, because data in and of itself without context just creates more challenges and more problems. It creates more discussion. I like to think of it kind of like a LinkedIn scenario. Most everybody I know has been on LinkedIn at one time or another, or maybe they've been on Facebook at one time or another. And so in these type of platforms, imagine if there was an analytics tab on your LinkedIn page, and you went to your LinkedIn page and you clicked on the analytics tab, and once you clicked on the LinkedIn analytics tab, it said birthdays, it said job changes, it said blog posts, it said news that's interesting to you, and I go, oh, okay, wow, here's some analytics going on in my community, and I click on job changes, and I click on job changes, and out pops a map of the United States, and I can see a heat map of the United States, and here's all my contacts, and oh wow, in Texas there was 122 people that I know that just had a job change. Wow, that's kind of cool. I'm getting access to data. I'm being able to visualize my data, right?
Right.
But what LinkedIn realized is that, you know what, how many people are going to go click on this information 4 or 5 times to be able to go drill down into it? The data analyst would, the business analyst might, but somebody who's actually out there trying to make something happen, they're not going to do that. We're just going to tell that person, hey, this person made a job change, tell them congratulations. So now the system's just going to deliver that information directly to them. That's where technology is leading organizations to be able to go. And that's how, when you look at just analytics by itself, the analytics have to be placed inside a system of intelligence that takes the analytic and pushes it to the right user so that the user knows what to do with it and can act on it. If you're just running analytics that sit inside an analytics engine, yes, it's important, but you're not delivering it to the area to be able to get the uplift on the analytic that you're looking for. And then how do you measure whether you got any uplift on that analytic? And that's where we're that link between what's going on in the analytic and what's going on in the business that drives the uplift that you're trying to create. That's that final mile, if you will, that brings that data source all into something contextual and something actionable. And when you do it from a nudge standpoint, it's a lot easier than just having to bang somebody over the head. So if I send somebody an insight that says, hey, your churn ratio is projected to be 20% in your life policies over the next 30 days in this particular zip code. Here's a list of the potential policies. Give them a call and have a conversation with them. Or you haven't connected with this particular individual in 45 days. Churn ratio says they may drop out, right? And so that's how when you personalize and contextualize that information, you're able to see that uplift, and an individual is able to consume that data, and there's an analytic, but now I'm making that analytic actionable through a nudge that says, if you make this phone call, if you make this action, you could stave off a result before it's too late.
So let's talk about, since we're talking about sales performance as one of the areas, but one of many that you could apply this to, economic impact. I know KPISoft worked with Forrester on a report that really teased out some key highlights of how KPISoft has helped companies increase performance, cut costs, streamline business process, and how that was quantified into economic impact. Could you share just a couple either key highlights or surprises that you uncovered in that report with Forrester that they did?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there was kind of a couple different areas in there. One being your quantified benefits, right, that really come down to things that were being measured. And so in this particular scenario, it was insurance premiums. And so there was a 32%, almost 33% increase in insurance premiums over the time period of the study, which became an incremental profit from agent productivities of almost $1.5 million. And so that became a significant play for this company because, again, as we began the conversation, they were in a roughly 90% revenue coming from 10% of agents. And so in order to be able to expand that and increase their agent population or their growth of their agent population, and now their risk as an organization wasn't significantly as high, and they began to tee in on some things that were very important from agent productivity and agent growth that they could replicate over and over and over. The other things that were interesting is just report generation type of scenario. The more that we were able to push information directly out through a mobile platform or a desktop platform, and sales managers, executives, agents themselves were able to save a lot of time from analyzing accurate reports to specifically getting to the heart of what was important to them. That became very significant. And then there's little things like gamification. and the ability to have leaderboards and leader tables and seeing where your peers are performing across the organization in a real-time environment, and where am I performing as compared to my peers? How much further do I have to go to be able to potentially win a sales contest or land another key account? So all of those things, having that data being pushed out directly to those individuals, it created a buy-in at a whole new level, and I think they were surprised by that. That as they contextualize that information and as they personalize that information, the users of the platform have really jumped to the KPISoft module. The funny thing about this is that when they rolled the platform, they were looking to go to a mobile strategy. So they actually rolled 5 mobile applications at the same time, KPISoft being one of the 5. After 12 months, KPISoft is the only mobile application that is still used on a day in and day out basis. So the access to data that they were able to get in all the other mobile platforms have kind of fallen by the wayside, because it wasn't the mobile adoption. It was, this is personalized, this is about me, this is data that immediately affects what I'm doing and how I can become better. And so that, I think, was the largest aha that came to this particular client that they weren't expecting. They thought, okay, let's just roll this mobily and give people access to data. What they've realized is access to data is no longer something that's different from anybody else. It's now, how do we give individuals data that's consumable and actionable and nudges you to move in the direction to be able to elevate yourself and your performance. So they end up having, the ROI, back to the numbers scenario, right? So their ROI on that was over 250%, and they received a payback within 6 months. They immediately saw the return of everything that they had invested and more, and now we're obviously rolling out at a much larger level with that client and many others in the insurance space that we're working with right now.
Well, we all look forward to, at the council, and look forward to seeing KPI's journey continue. I know those of you that are listening, Scott can be found on LinkedIn, and you can also follow KPISoft there, and reach out to Scott if you want to get into more granular questions directly. Thank you so much, Scott, for joining us today. And thank you for listening to CouncilCast. You can listen more on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or SoundCloud. And everyone, please subscribe and leave us a review or rating to tell us how we're doing on these. If you have any questions or comments for us, you can find us at CIAB.com, at the CIAB on Twitter, or you can email in at councilcast@CIAB.com. Thank you so much, Scott, for being with us today, and we'll see you next time.